We are going to go over just some basics with graphing. I can show you this calculator here that's on the side, but it's basically a TI. For the most part, it's identical to most TIs. Unfortunately, I don't have an app calculator for Casio that I can bring up on my iPad, but Casio is an easier graphing calculator to work with. So I will go through that. I do have a Casio calculator with me, so I will go through which buttons to push. Okay, so basic graphing. What we want to do is with a TI calculator, we want to go to y equals on the top left. So there for me. And then it brings up y1, y2, etc. And this is where we want to enter our equations. Okay, so we have some examples down here. So we can do this first one. Enter x squared plus 3x minus 2. Now, whenever you want to enter a variable, we're always going to use x, and the button that you use is beside alpha on TIs. It says xt theta n. This one on my iPad only says x, but usually it says xt theta n. On the Casio, it's just below the alpha button, and it says x theta t. Okay, so you're always going to use that for your variable. So x and then squared is our example here. I'm doing this one. So x squared plus 3x minus 2. There's my equation. Okay, so when we want to see the graph, then you push graph. With a Casio, if you want a graph, you push the menu button, and then you look for the graph icon. In this particular Casio I'm using, it's number 5, but it might not be on yours. So just look for the one that says graph, and go to that one either by your cursor or by just pushing the number of that icon. Okay, so either you go there with your cursor and it highlights dark, and then you hit the EXE button, or you just push the number of your cursor. Okay. Then we enter our equation. So x squared plus 3x minus 2, and then we hit the EXE button. After you hit the EXE button, you can hit EXE again, or the button F6 says draw, so you can hit that one. Okay, and I'm going to push graph on the TI in the top right, and then we have our graph. Now, if your window is not set to standard and you want to do that, you can go zoom button there, and then it says for the TIs, number 6 is usually Z standard. In this app, it's number 3. Okay, it says Z standard there. Let's see if I can get a pointer. So it says, no, can't do the pointer on there. That's okay. It says Z standard for number 3. So I'm going to push number 3, and it gives me a standard view, which is plus 10, minus 10, going up by increments of 1. I'm going to do the same on the Casio. I'm going to push F2 for zoom. Nope, sorry, exit. On the Casio, it's window. F3 for window. And then on the bottom, there's a few options. And F3 says STD, which stands for standard in this case. So we push F3, and it changes the X-min, X-max scale, Y-min, Y-max scale to -10, 10, and 1. Then I can just hit EXE, EXE, and it takes me back to my graph. Okay, so I now have the same window, 10 by 10. Well, 20 by 20 actually, -10 to +10. If I wanted to try other methods of seeing the graph, I could try zoom auto. So on the TI, zoom, and then zoom fit, sorry, on the TI, zoom fit. So number 6 in this case, I think on the actual TIs, it's usually option 0. So push number 6, and it usually fits somewhat on your screen. Casios, you can do the same thing. You can go zoom F2, and then ours is called auto on the Casios. It's option F5. Okay, so you push that. It gives us about the same thing that we see on the TI. Let's go back to standard. So I'm going to go zoom, standard is number 3. And then on my Casio, I'm going to go window, standard is number F3. And then EXE, EXE. All right, so that's the image I have on my graph. What else? A window, adjusting our window setting. So if you want to manually adjust your window setting, sometimes your auto or your zoom fit doesn't work. Sometimes you just have to think about it and think about the question and the types of numbers you have. Maybe your numbers are really big, and so you need to go up into the hundreds, okay? So you can go to window, and you can enter there whatever you want. So maybe I want to do negative 200, and then for my x max, so that x min would be going left. The left is negative 200. Let's say I want to go 100 for the going to the right, the x max. Maybe I go up by tens. My y min, let's say that I do negative 50. Oops. Negative 50. My y max, maybe I'd go up to 100. And my scale, maybe I go up by 10. Okay. You can do the same thing on a Casio just by pushing F3 window. And then you just start changing the numbers. Start typing in, using the down arrow to go to the next one, or hitting enter after, and then using the down arrow if you're not changing it. Okay. All right, so I do that, and then I can graph it, and I get a different view of it. Sometimes it's not clear exactly what window you need. Sometimes you need to play around. Sometimes you need to think about the question. Okay. All right, so finding some information. We can find lots of information about a graph. In 20-1, we're often working with quadratics, which create parabolas. That's the shape that we see here on our screen. I'm just going to change my window back to standard. So zoom number 3 on here. There we go. So we can find the vertex. We can find the x-intercept. We can find the y-intercept. We can find the coordinates of a point if we give it the x value. And we can find the coordinates if we give it a y value. Those are the things we can do. So let's first of all graph this example. Well, how do we graph? We want to find some points that we can plot on our grid here. I'm going to make this bigger. So let's find the minimum value. As you can see, this graph opens up kind of like a bowl, and there's a lowest point to the bowl. That's called our minimum value. So let's find that. So how do we do that? Vertex. Minimum if the graph opens up and has a lowest point, which is what it does. So in a TI, we do second function trace, because if you look at the trace button, the second function of that button is calculate. So second function, trace, because we want to calculate something about our graph. Then we want to choose the one that says minimum, which is number 3. Okay, and then it says left bound. Now this is why I don't prefer TIs, because they're just more cumbersome than Casios. Okay, so it should show you a little blinking like dot on your screen, and you need to move that dot left of the minimum point. Okay, so I don't see a dot on mine, just the way that it works on the iPad, so I'm just going to use my pencil to put a dot there. So easier on a touch screen than on your actual calculator. Okay, and then I can use my left-right cursor and I can move it around. So where it is anywhere along this side of the graph would be left of the minimum point, right? The minimum point would be down here. So this is on the left side of the minimum point. Anywhere along this. okay? Makes sense? So anywhere along there, I hit enter. Then it says right bound. So it needs me to move my little dot until it's on the right side of the minimum value. So this would be at the minimum value. Anywhere after that would be on the right side of the minimum value, okay? So I could even go here, as long as it's definitely right of that minimum. And I hit enter. And then on the actual TI, it usually says, do you want to guess? And you just hit enter a third time, and then it tells you, okay? So 1.495 and 4.2495. So basically 1.5 and 4.2. All right, on a Casio, it's just so much easier. That's why I like a Casio. All you're gonna do is do F5 for G solve. When we want to find information about a graph, we push solve, so F5. And then it comes up with options, and we push F3, which is the minimum. So F3. And it just tells me. I don't have to do any go left, go right. It just says, okay, here's the point you asked me for. So it tells me that it is 1.5 and negative 4.25. Now this is another thing that I find about the TIs. Sometimes, and I don't know why it does this. Sorry, you might be able to hear my dogs walking around. Sometimes the values should actually be exact values, but the TI shows them as like really long decimals. Okay, so it might be like it's supposed to be 3.0, it's supposed to be 3, but it'll show it as like 3.0000005. I don't know why it does that. You would just round and write it down as 3, okay? So this shows us negative 1.495, but my Casio is telling me it's negative 1.5, and then negative 4.249975, but my Casio is showing me that it's negative 4.25, okay? So going back to our graph, we can plot those, or we can plot that minimum value. Negative 1.5, and then go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a quarter. Oops, I'm still on my pointer. Okay, negative 1.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a quarter, so about there. Now let's find the x-intercepts, so we can graph those. Actually, let's find the y-intercept. Okay, so that's where it crosses the y-axis. So for x-intercept, y-intercept, for TI, we are going second trace. We're pretty much always starting with that because we're trying to find information about our graph. And then this one's pretty easy. We want the value, so number 1. And then it says, what's the x value that you're looking for, that you want the y value for? Well, at the y-intercept, the x value is always 0. So we put in 0 and hit enter, okay? And it tells us negative 2. For the Casio, again, you're going to do F5 because we're solving something for our graph. And then which one do we want to do? We want the y-intercept. You can see it's F4 y-ICPT intercept, okay? So F4, and it says x is 0, y is negative 2. So going back to our graph, x is 0, y is negative 2. So down there. Make my dots a little bigger so when I shrink this, I can still see it. All right, now quadratics are symmetrical. So about the vertex. So since I have a point that is 2.25 units above my vertex and 1.5 units to the right, I would also have a point that is in the at the same y value, but 1.5 units to the left. So over here. Okay. Now let's find our x-intercepts. X-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis which means that y is equal to 0, and there may be more than one for a quadratic. You can see that it crosses the x-axis twice in this situation. So TIs, again, second trace. The x-intercepts are also called the solutions. They're called the zeros. They're called the roots. So in the TI calculator, they're called the zeros. So we're going to select option number 2. In the Casio, they're called the roots. All right, so now the TI makes us do the left bound, right bound thing. And we're talking about 2 different points. So we have to do it twice, okay? So right now, I'm going to focus on the negative x-intercept. I'm going to draw a dot because it doesn't give me one. Usually on yours, you should have a blinking cursor on your screen and you can move that around with your left, right. So I just plopped mine on there and now I can move it around, okay? So here, about there, is my x-intercept. I need to go left of that point. So if you look at the graph, where is left of that point? Well, as the graph goes up, it goes out to the left. So the part that's above this x-intercept is left of it. I hit enter. Then it says right bound. So I need to go right of the x-intercept. If you look at the graph, the part that is below that x-intercept is right of it, okay? I don't want to continue right and keep going and keep going and keep going until I get past the other x-intercept, because then the calculator doesn't know which x-intercept you're trying to find. So I want to stay just with the one x-intercept between my 2 points, okay? But anywhere in this bottom section below y equals 0 is going to be right of that x-intercept. So I'm going to hit enter here. And you should see little arrows on your screen, and they should be pointing in, okay? Because the x-intercept should be in between those arrows. If the arrows are pointing outwards, you're going to get an error message because you did it backwards. So then it usually will say, do you want to guess? And you hit enter again, and then it gives us our x-intercept, which it says is negative 3.562, and then of course y equals 0. Let's do that with the Casio. Again, just F5, and then it's called the roots in this case. Just hit F1, okay? You don't have to do any left, right. The only thing is it's gonna tell us, we can find the second one right away. So for mine, it showed me the same one that we found, negative 3.56, and it actually has a bunch more decimals. If I want to find the next one, I just push the right cursor or the right arrow, and it tells me 0.56 and 0. So I can just go left and right and go back and forth between the 2 x-intercepts, okay? To find the second x-intercept with the TI, we have to repeat this process. So we need to do second trace again. It's number 2, the 0. Now we're talking about the x-intercept that's over here. So I need to decide which part of the graph is left of that and which part is right of that. If I look at the graph, on that side so the right side of the minimum value, when I go down, it starts to move to the right. So down, or sorry, to the left. So down is left of that x-intercept. So I'm going to hit enter. Now I need to go right, it says. So if I go up, as you go up, the graph is moving out to the right. So anywhere up there is right of that x-intercept. I hit enter. I believe it should ask you if you want to hit, or if you want to guess, hit enter a third time, and then it gives us the value 0.56 and 0. Now we can go back and plot them. So it was 0.56, we're just going to go about 0.5, and then the other one was negative 3.56, so -1, -2, -3.5-ish, about there. Okay? And once we have that, we can join our points with a bit of a curve. Wow, not very pretty, but that's okay. So something like that. There's our quadratic. Okay, so what else did we do? We did the vertex, we did the x-intercepts, we did the y-intercept, coordinate based on an x value, and then a coordinate based on a y value. Let's try that. Okay, let's find a coordinate based on an x value. Again, Casio, or TI, sorry, second trace. We want to find a value, number 1. It says x equals, so you can put in x equals whatever. This is the same thing we did to find the y-intercept. We put in x equals 0. Now let's put in, I don't know, let's put in x equals 5 and hit enter. Y equals 38, okay? On a Casio, you're gonna go F5, as always. Then you have to go F6, because we need more options. So it's the over arrow. And then it says F1 is Y calc. So it's gonna calculate a Y value based on the X value you give it. Enter X value, it says. I'm gonna enter 5, hit EXE, and it tells me that it is 38. Good. All right, let's try doing a coordinate based on a Y value. All right, in a TI, you have to go back to your graph, or where you enter your equations for your graph. And we need to enter the Y value that we want. So let's say that we want to know what the value of X is when Y is equal to 3. I have to enter that as a graph, and then I'm going to graph it. And then what we want to do is find the intersection point. We go second trace, as usual. Number 5 says intersect, so I push number 5. It's to find the intersections of the two graphs. It says, are you on the first curve? Yeah, my little dot is on one of the graphs, so I hit enter. It'll jump to the second graph. It says, are you on the second curve? Yes, I am. I just hit enter again. Then it says, do I want to guess? No, I don't care to guess. So I hit enter again, and then it tells me X is 1.193 and Y is 3.002249. To do the second one, we have to redo that process, but we want to now move our cursor so it's closer to the point we're trying to find. So I found the positive one, now I want to find the negative one. Second trace. Number 5, intersect. I want to move my cursor before I hit enter. I want to move it so that it's closer to the point that I want to find, because I already found the other one. Now I hit enter. It jumps to the second graph. I want to move it closer to the point I'm trying to find. I hit enter. It asks me if I want to guess. I hit enter, and then it tells me negative 4.193 and 3.00249. Okay? Next, with a Casio, you do F5, of course, F6 for more options. This time we want to X calculate, so we want to calculate the X values based on the Y value. We hit F2. It says enter the Y value. We put in 3, hit EXE. It tells us the first one. It's telling me the negative one is negative 4.192 and Y equals 3, obviously. I just use my cursor, so I move to the right, and it'll jump to the next one. X is 1.192 and Y is 3, obviously. Okay? So easier with the Casio, that's why I prefer the Casio. Anywho, let's give it a shot with the next one. So we have to go back and graph. Go to Y equals. We're going to clear this. We're going to clear this. Going to go back up. Enter our equation. So notice that we have a negative in front of our x squared and we have a minus. Those are two different things when you're graphing, so, or in the calculator in general. For the negative in front of the x squared, you have to use this little negative that's beside the enter in brackets. This is the same on the Casio. You have to do the same thing, okay? So it's negative and then x squared, and then minus is like the regular minus above the plus sign. Notice how one of them's small, one of them's big. If you are trying to enter something and graph it and you get an error message, when you look at your equation, check that if you have a negative in front, it should be the little negative button. And then if you are subtracting something, that should be the big minus, okay? Because if you have them mixed up, then it won't graph. You'll have an error message. Okay, I've graphed that. Here's my screen. I can see my vertex. I don't have any x-intercepts. Notice that? It's opening down and it doesn't ever cross the x-axis. So I have no x-intercepts. I'm going to do the same on the Casio. So to get back to my entering the equations, I hit exit. I can go up. So I'm highlighting the y1 line. And then I want to delete F2. It says DEL above it. So I push F2. It says delete formula. Yes, F1. No, F6. I push F1. Yes, I would like to delete it. Now it's empty. I can go in and enter negative, which is the negative button beside the EXE, x squared minus 3. Hit EXE, hit F6 or EXE, either one. Gives me pretty much the same image that I have on my screen. Okay, I want to find the vertex. Notice in this case, it's opening down, so it's like a hill or a mountain. So it has a maximum value for the vertex. I go second trace on my Casio. Number 4 is the maximum. I have to do left bound, right bound thing. Looking at where the maximum is, it's about there. I need to go left of that point. The graph goes left here. So anywhere left at that point, hit enter. Then I need to go right of that point. To the right I go. Okay, hit enter. And then it tells me. I believe it'll say guess on yours. So 0 and negative 3. All right, same thing for the Casio. F5 to find any information about your graph. We want the maximum, it's F2. Push that button and it just tells you 0, negative 3. Notice that that point is also the y-intercept. So if we went second trace on our Casio and then we did the value, number 1, and it said x equals what? Well, for the y-intercept, x equals 0. So I put 0 in, hit enter, y equals negative 3. On the Casio, to find the y-intercept, F5, F4, that's it. It tells me y equals negative 3, which we already knew. Okay, so I only have 1 point, which makes it kind of hard to draw the graph. So I'm going to find some points for the x values. I'm just going to put in x values and get it to give me what the y value is. Second trace, number 1, value. It says x equals. We're going to enter some values. So I'm going to enter negative 1. When x is negative 1, it tells me that y is negative 4. I can plot that point. Negative 1, negative 1, 2, 3, negative 4. Same process, second trace, number 1. I'm going to try x equals positive 1. And I get negative 4 also, which makes sense because quadratics are symmetrical about the vertex. So if I have a point that is down 1 and left 1 of the vertex, then I need to have a point that is down 1 and right 1 of the vertex as well. Let's see, looking at my graph, I think another good point to check would be x equals -2 and x equals 2. So second trace, 1, x equals -2, enter, tells me that y is -7. -2 and -7. Because it's symmetrical, I know that I'll have a point at +2, -7. I can check that. Second trace, number 1, x equals 2, y equals -7. Then I can draw my graph. Still not very pretty, but that's okay. It's just a sketch. And there's my graph. On a Casio, doing the same thing. F5, as usual, we want more options. So F6, we want to calculate the y value based on the x value we enter. It says enter, so that was F1, enter the x value. So we did -1 was our first one. Hit exe, tells us y is -4. Do that again. F5, F6, F1, then I can enter +1. exe tells me y is -4. Do that again. F5, F6 for more options, F1 for y calc, enter the x value of -2, hit exe, tells me y is -7, and last time F5, F6, F1, enter +2, exe, tells me y is -7. Okay, so we've drawn our sketch of our graph, and that's how to use your graphing calculator, whether you have a TI or a Casio, to do some basic stuff with graphs. Hopefully it's helpful. I would recommend that you keep this sheet handy and reference it often when you are doing practice problems and you need to find the vertex, x-intercept, y-intercept, etc. And if you don't remember how, reference the sheet.